Glad you're here again, as always. And we will be beginning this new part here in our study. Part 6. Which could technically almost possibly still be a part of that busy day that we've looked at in the fifth part, as some at least have calculated, or it could be the next day. This morning we looked at the storm that Jesus calmed with a word of command, and we mentioned how that happened the evening of the day, that busy day, and so depending on how long it took them to get across the Sea of Galilee would determine at what point the next event happened. So tonight we're going to look at a story, an account rather. I always hesitate to use the word story, even though it's the word that naturally comes to the lips anyway. In the life of Jesus when He healed a demon-possessed man. And along with this, we're going to look at some more things about demons in general to help us to understand what it meant to be possessed by a demon. It's one of those concepts that I think have become muddy waters, maybe because we use it, we as a people anyway, we use it as not really an expression, but we use that for different things. Like somebody has a demon, we use it figuratively and metaphorically and whatever else. So what actually were demons? What does it mean, or what did it mean to be possessed by a demon? On this occasion, Jesus cast out many demons at once. He's already cast out many demons overall, but on this one event, this one or two men, He cast out many demons just between them. So, some questions for us to think about as we begin. Who are these demons? Where do demons come from? Are we affected by demons today? Those are three things that we're going to look at in further detail later on tonight. First, we're going to read Luke chapter 8, verses 26 through 40. Or 39. Actually, our text has 40 in there, so we'll throw 40 in there. We're going to use Luke. This morning we used Matthew, and then we referenced Mark and Luke. Tonight we're going to use Luke and then reference Mark and Matthew. This is one of those rare accounts where Mark's is longer than Matthew's. Matthew's gospel record is much longer than Mark. Mark's the short one. And yet there are a few accounts in there where Mark's is actually longer than Matthew's, and this is one of them. So we're going to use Luke's account primarily. Here's what Luke records. Luke chapter 8, beginning in verse 26. It says, "Then they sailed to the country of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. When Jesus had stepped out on land, there met him a man from the city who had demons. For a long time he had worn no clothes, and he had not lived in a house, but among the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him and said with a loud voice, 'What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me.' For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For many a time it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles, but he would break the bonds and be driven by the demon into the desert. Jesus then asked him, 'What is your name?' And he said, 'Legion,' for many demons had entered him. And they begged him not to command them to depart into the abyss. Now a large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him to let them enter these. So he gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and drowned. When the herdsmen saw what had happened, they fled and told it in the city and in the country. Then people went out to see what had happened. And they came to Jesus and found the man from whom the demons had gone sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. And those who had seen it told them how the demon-possessed man had been healed. Then all the people of the surrounding country of the Gerasenes asked him to depart from them, for they were seized with great fear. So he got into the boat and returned. The man from whom the demons had gone begged that he might be with him. But Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you." And he went away, proclaiming throughout the whole city how much Jesus had done for him. Now when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. Okay, so much for Luke's account of this event in the life of Christ, okay? There is some very interesting things in here that we'll point out here. Obviously, Jesus and his disciples reached their destination that they were, that we looked at this morning. Let's go to the other side of the lake. They arrive, according to Luke and Mark, in the country of the Gerasenes. But Matthew's account says the country of the Gadarenes. Well, which one is it? And the answer is yes. Okay? That is the correct answer. It seems that there is maybe a little bit of a tilt that Matthew's, it's the same place, but Matthew's is probably the better translation there. Some of the manuscripts in Mark and Luke even say Gadarenes, but maybe that's why, depending on the version that you have, they might have different philosophies on which manuscripts to give the prominence to, and some of them would choose the majority and some choose the oldest, even if it's in the minority. Well, the Gadarenes is probably better here. And I don't have the map that I had this morning, but I put a little thing in the southeast edge of the eastern to southeastern bank of the Sea of Galilee, and that little region there. You can see a city a few miles off the coast of the Sea of Galilee called Gadara, or Gadara maybe. That clearly is a reference to this country of the Gadarenes. And the word country there just means a part of an area of land, not necessarily a country like we call a country, like a sovereign nation. We live in this country and other people live in other countries, but just region, the region of the Gadarenes. There's also been a village discovered called Gerasa, spelled not with a G, but it has been linked to Gerasa and therefore Gerasenes. But this is where they went, this region, this area. We don't know exactly. But apparently they didn't get very far, because the text says that seems to indicate that as soon as Jesus got out of the boat, more or less, something happened. He was met by somebody. He was met, again, according to Mark and Luke, who mention only one. Obviously, the more dominant of the two. Matthew includes the detail that there was another demon-possessed man with him. Which one's true? Same answer. Yes. There were two, because if there were two, there were also one, right? There can't be two without one. So even though Mark and Luke don't mention the other one, because he's more in the backdrop, Matthew just includes the other one. The conversation occurred between Jesus and that one. So that's the one they mention. This was some kind of case. A case like Jesus had not met before, as far as we know. And apparently it was an unusual case even in general. What are some things that are used to describe this man? And how serious his case of demonization, or whatever you want to call it, was?
Well, Matthew said he was
Okay, so we have no one could pass that way. It doesn't say no one would. It says no one could. You know why? Because it seems anybody that did got beat up. He attacked them. He ran out and he made them regret that they went that way. Mark gives us some more detail, the same that Luke includes, maybe just a little bit different language. He says that he had often, no one could bind him, it says, not even with a chain. So they had already given up on ropes. They tried chains. And they couldn't even bind him with chains because he would break the chains. And then he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day, he was among the tombs, Mark says in 5 verse 5. He was crying out, cutting himself with stones, okay? Now, Luke says pretty much nothing new from Matthew and Mark. He was kept under guard. There's a new one, I think, at least as a regular thing. He was constantly kept under guard in addition to being bound with chains. But then he would break through the chains and then get away from his guards. And he would go. That shows us that this seemed to have been something almost like it wasn't a constant state, but it was like in fits. Because that's the only way to make sense of the fact that he had multiple times been bound with chains and multiple times had broken the chains and run off. He would have these fits where this would come over him, and then there might have been a time when he was relatively okay and unaffected, maybe not ever totally unaffected, but at least there were these waves, as difficult as that might be for us to understand. So here again we have this example of how Jesus had no time to relax at all, because here he comes out of the boat, and this is the man that comes to meet him. The man who had a habit of coming to meet people that got within a certain distance so he could beat them up. On this occasion, does Jesus get beat up? He runs out to Jesus and he falls down at his feet. And the things that he says are fascinating. First of all, he says, in Matthew's account, Matthew has the pronouns as plural from the start of the conversation. What have you to do with us, O Son of God? And I don't think that means us as in me and this other man, but the demon and the other demons. Although it could go either way. Still multiple demons either way. But he says, have you come to torment us? Which would indicate the demons. Have you come here to torment us before the time? Now, isn't that interesting? What in the world is that? I don't know if we can give it an exact answer. What is the time? Come to torment us before the time? We'll talk about that here in a few minutes maybe. That's Matthew's account, verse 29. Mark's account says, what have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me. And Luke's account has him saying, what have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me. What do all three of these have in common? One thing they have in common. Yeah, they all indicate an understanding that Jesus has power over them. Don't torment us. And they all have that exact request. Don't, or at least not a request, but mention the torment. Have you come here to torment us? Please don't torment us. So Jesus has authority over these, whatever they are, which we'll see in a few minutes. And He has the authority to do or not do something to them. What did you say?
I mean, they know exactly who He is.
Yeah, that's the other thing. They know who Jesus is. Exactly who He is. Son of the Most High God. I don't even know if John the Baptizer said it that plainly. He said, I can tell you for certain this is the Son of God. But they threw in extra in there. Son of the Most High God, which means the same thing. But it's strange to hear that from a demon. Mark and Luke both. Jesus, Son of the Most High God.
Well, they've been in heaven with Him before they were cast down.
Okay. Got ahead of us a little bit.
Well, I'm just mean
that. These were spirit beings that knew Jesus. They knew Him somehow. I mean, obviously. However it was, they knew. They had this knowledge from somewhere, and that's a big clue as to maybe not give us the answer, but to help us arrive at an answer as to who they were, what they were, who they were, which, if we can determine that, will help us to determine, what, if anything, they are today. So, they knew Jesus. They knew that He had authority in general and over them. I still always get hung up on the time thing. Man, that really gets me. Have you come to torment us before the time? I take that, if we pair that with what Peter said in 2 Peter, 4:2 or 2:4? I always get it backwards. He says that they're being held in chains until judgment. What did Jesus say about, well, I'll say what did He say? From where we are, He said it. We haven't gotten there in our study yet. But about hell, for whom did God create hell? Yeah, the devil and his angels. Well, now I've gotten ahead of us a little bit, but just hold that thought. Okay? So, that's what they say to Jesus. But then Jesus is not done with the conversation. He asks this interesting question. What is your name? Now remember, Jesus, from the outside, this is Jesus talking to a man. This very disturbed man who showed signs of what, back in the old days would be what people just call crazy. Back before all the fancy talk and political correctness. It's just what you call, he's crazy. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a huge difference between mental insanity and demon possession. But that is what it would have looked like. And we see that from the description, with the exception of the seemingly superhuman strength. He wouldn't wear clothes. He ran off randomly, shouting and cutting himself with stones. And if anybody came by, he would come out and he would beat them up. That's somebody that you need to, for their own protection and others, put them in a straitjacket and in a padded room. But when he asks, what is your name? The man doesn't answer, although he's using the man's vocal cords and mouth. But the demon answers. Because this man's name was not Legion. He says, my name is Legion because we're many. Interesting. And from that point on, it says he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country or out of, where would they go if he sent them out of the country? Well, apparently somewhere they didn't want to go. Here's another thing. Before the time is one of the big head scratchers. The other one is what Luke says in verse 31, Luke 8:31. They begged him not to command them to depart into what? The abyss. What's the abyss? We don't read about that very often, do we? Did Jesus ever talk about the abyss? Not that I remember. Do any other New Testament writers ever talk about the abyss in those words? In that terminology? I can't recall any, at least so direct as that. Now we read about some places that might be referred to as something like that. You could almost call where the rich man with the rich man and Lazarus, where he went, could be called an abyss, I think, of sorts. What are some other things called the abyss in the Bible? I'll tell you the only one I can think of. Okay, angels, or is that another angel passage there? They're in chains of darkness?
Yeah, I thought it was in Revelation.
It might be in there as well. Utter darkness. I think the passage I referred to earlier actually says they're held in chains of pits of darkness. Anybody know what the main thing that is called the abyss in the Bible is? The ocean. It's one of the things anyway. I don't think that's what he's talking about here. So that, what? Okay, a lake of fire could be like an abyss. There's something that he's calling this is not a quote from the demon, but Luke just says that he was asking him that. Now, whether or not the demon called it that, or whether Luke is just calling it that, it's one of those times when you really wish Luke would have done what John did many times and put that parentheses in there, which he did in verse 29, but tell us what you're talking about. What's the abyss? Just give us a little something, just something else. Even a different word, but we're not given anything. But it's still very interesting to think about. So apparently there's an appointed time where they are going to be cast into an abyss. So file those two things away for a few minutes as well. It just so happened that a large herd of pigs was passing by. They were feeding on the hillside there. Wrong place, wrong time. So they had an idea. Send us into those pigs. Let us go there. Which seems to indicate that demons have to have a living host, or they're out of they're gone. They're going back to whatever the abyss is, or wherever it is that they don't want to go is where they're going to be going, if they don't have anything to be inhabiting on the earth. Otherwise, that's the only thing that makes sense with their request. And hey, well, how about the pigs? Will that work? Maybe they thought that was their best shot. Obviously, they're not going to be bold enough to ask to go into some more people. So they ask the pigs. Now, how can a demon possess pigs? I have no clue. I don't know.
Well, how can they possess people?
Yeah, I don't know how they possess people either.
And if they have to have a living host, I don't see how they're going to be better going to the pigs, considering what they made the pigs do.
Yeah, it didn't work.
They'll be alive for very long.
Yeah. Well, obviously they didn't expect that, because when Jesus gives them permission, he lets it happen. I think that's a key element here, and a lot of people like to blur the line between allowing something and making something happen, but there is a line there. Jesus lets them do that, and so they go into the pigs. And the pigs, if you think that man couldn't handle it, the pigs couldn't handle it for sure. Because you talk about abnormal behavior, those pigs then run off of that hillside and deliberately go into, what does it call it here? A lake? Was it the Sea of Galilee maybe still? Or some other smaller body? I think maybe the natural The interpretation would be that they're still near the Sea of Galilee. They ran in there. Now, whenever we talk about a hillside, I used to think they ran off a cliff. Pigs all in a row. Here we go. We're falling off the cliff into the sea. I don't think there is a cliff on the bank of the Sea of Galilee. So we're not talking about a steep hill where the pigs could, lose their little pig minds and start falling off the cliff. But they deliberately ran into the sea to seemingly to kill themselves. That's what the demons going into them did to those pigs. Now, Matthew says it was a steep bank, but again, we're not talking like a cliff, but a bank where they ran down, rushed down, he says, not fell down, but rushed down and drowned in the water. So, Mark says steep bank, rushed down the steep bank. Also, they all say rushed down the steep bank. Now the herdsmen of these pigs, apparently, saw all this that had happened. And they run into the city and in the country. In other words, they went and told everybody what they saw. And whenever a story like this is told, what do you think all those people are going to do? Same thing they did in Samaria or in Sychar. Remember when the woman goes and says, hey, come here and meet a man who told me everything I ever did? What'd they do? Hey, I want to go see that guy. That sounds fun. Interesting. Now they run out and they find this man who's notorious, obviously. This man's going to be well known in those parts, either by personal experience or by word of mouth. Word of this man and his behavior is going to be spread, and everybody's going to know who he was. It was probably like a game for some people to go and see if they can see him and stuff, I would imagine. Young, inconsiderate people anyway. And they go and they see this man acting even stranger than he did before. By the way, they would have assumed he would be acting. He's sitting at Jesus' feet, clothed. How in the world are they getting him to put a shirt on? And in his right mind, another key phrase to describe the difference that occurred, the change that occurred. He was in his right mind, and they were afraid. But I think the most shocking part of all of this, especially considering verse 36 in Luke 8 tells us that they were told the explanation of why he's sitting here in Jesus' feet, presumably learning from him, is because Jesus healed him. He cast the demons out. This man was demon-possessed with many demons. That explains his behavior. That explains what his life situation has been for however long this has been going on. And Jesus saved him from that. And what they did next is the most shocking part. They go to Jesus and they tell him to leave. To me, that is even more shocking than everything that we just read, as amazing as it all is. How could that be their reaction? They asked him to leave. So he got in the boat and left. But here's the saddest part, in a way. That man begged Jesus. We got a lot of he's and hims in verse 38 that can make it confusing. But the man that Jesus had healed begged Jesus that he might go be with him. Be with him. What does that mean? What's he asking? What do you think he's wanting? Yeah, he's wanting to simply be with him wherever, always, like Peter and Andrew, James and John and everybody. He wants to be with it. Wherever Jesus is, he wants to be there with him. But Jesus wouldn't let him. Harsh, we might think. But Jesus had a job for him that he could do without being a permanent follower or disciple of Jesus at this point. There's no application of this today of I don't have to be with a Christian to do God's will or something like that. But in this unique case, Jesus said, I have a job for you. Your job is to go back home and to tell everybody about how much God has done for you. Now, there is application in that. Not so much to go around telling people what God has done for me, which a lot of religious groups advocate, and I could not be more against that, at least in theory. Jesus didn't say, go as you go, tell everybody about you and what God has done for you. You go out and preach the gospel. But he said, you go tell people what God has done for you. And here's something interesting. Luke concludes by saying he went away and proclaimed throughout the whole city what? How much Jesus had done for him. Interesting. Jesus said, go and tell everybody how much God's done for you. He went and never told everybody how much Jesus did for him. Is that significant? Maybe not, but it seems like it to me. Not necessarily that this man understood that Jesus was God, but there is a correlation there, certainly. Jesus was doing God's will, and what Jesus did could be said to be God's doing. Because it was. Okay, so much for the account itself. Anybody have any comments or anything on the narrative before we look at the questions about demons in general?
I like the book about debate.
Oh, the little story from Truth for Today part. Yeah, if you didn't see in your paper, there's a little snippet of a story. It says a denominational preacher, they were debating on baptism. And the denominational preacher said that there were no examples of immersion in the Bible. But then he quickly took that back and said, well, yeah, there is one case, and that is the case of these pigs in the Mark 5, Luke 8, and Matthew 8. So it says, Brother John S. Sweeney took the platform and said, yes, that was a case of immersion, and because the devil lost his bacon in the deal, he's been trying to change the mode of baptism ever since. I hope that's a true story. I take it as a true story, but pretty quick. To be honest, if it is true, the most fascinating part of that is that somebody could say there's no examples of immersion in the Bible. But it's a different topic. Certainly this is not even a case of immersion in the Bible, but that's just trying to be cute little way to change the plan of salvation that God instituted, which is a terrifying and appalling thing for any man to attempt to do. Certainly not something to take lightly. So, what are demons? There are several theories. Here are some facts we know about demons. They are spirits. Matthew 8:16, they're spirit beings. They're intelligent beings, sentient beings. They not all-knowing, but certainly not, brutish beast-like things. They are intelligent beings. They are wicked and ultimately will face judgment. That's 2 Peter 2:4 and Jude 6. They come from the abyss, it seems. That's maybe interpretive of Luke 8:31. Doesn't necessarily say, at least in the ESV, don't send us back into the abyss, but just don't send us to the abyss. All those are the facts we know about them. Who were these demons? Now we have some prominent theories. Some say they are some sort of pre-Adamic race, pre-Adam, and they allege that it happened between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. Some say they are a breed, they were bred from angels and women, per Genesis 6:1-6. We've talked about that at least a few times over the course of these last few years. It is claimed that Genesis 6:1-6 records the intermingling of angels, fallen angels with women, human women. That is not true. That cannot happen. Jesus says that angels don't marry, which implies in the context and in general that they are sexless beings. They don't have physical bodies, and sexual union is a strictly physical union, and if you're not a physical being, then you can't have a physical union, and so it's utter nonsense to suggest that angels could have that sort of union with women. So, also, the idea that they are fallen angels is who demons are. That is the most prominent belief and the most likely. Spirits of evil men, some believe. There are no scriptures to support that. Josephus sort of, I don't know if he invented that view, but he held it himself. Alexander Campbell, ironically, also did, but there is nothing in Scripture to support that. Some say that it's just an illness. Demon possession was not any sort of possession whatsoever. It's just illness, like I made reference to just being crazy, something like that. And Mark 1:32 is maybe used to try to support that. Doesn't stand the test, however. You can't speak with an illness. Jesus spoke with whatever was possessing these men and other ones that possessed people. So clearly, you can't believe in both the Bible and Jesus or that theory, because you can't have both. What did the demons cause in people? Remember some of the accounts of demon possession? Well, we know this one caused all sorts of various behaviors that could be described as insanity. Epilepsy or things like that. The young man or the boy who, probably young man who had seizures and would fall into the fire or the water. You know, his father was very, or was it a owner? One of the two was very distraught and asking Jesus, please help. Blindness is another. Dumbness. Here, physical strength in this case here. It's a very fascinating thing to think about is this demon possession, especially as Alfred Edersheim points out that in these demonized people, this demonized state, the people were seemingly incapable of separating their own consciousness and ideas from the influence of the demon. And so it's like this strange blend of the afflicted and the tormentor, to where helps us to understand this man's behavior, and these two things sort of being combined into one. But the man's identity was not really overtaken, but more like just controlled for the time of his possession, and that can help us to understand maybe a little bit without getting it confused with normal mental illness or anything like that. Here's the big question. Are people afflicted by demons today? You might be surprised at the varied answers you might get if you did a survey with this question. Are people afflicted by demons? Now, the answer to that question will be directly affected by what you understand demons to be and demon possession to have been. if I understand that demon possession is, this or that, well, that kind of thing might happen. Are people influenced by evil today? Yeah. Sadly, more than they're influenced by good. Well, if that's what I think demon possession is, then yeah, it happens today. Problem is, that's not what demon possession was. Demon possession was a very specific, limited, temporary phenomenon that seems to have been restricted specifically in and around the ministry of Jesus. Now, why would anybody say that?
There's no reference of it anywhere else in the Bible.
Yeah, that's a big one. Anybody remember the time Elijah healed a demon-possessed man? No, you don't, because it never happened. I made that up. Trick question. Now, Elijah and Elisha did do many marvelous things, raising somebody from the dead and things of that sort. Other instances of similar types of healings and things occurred in the Old Testament. Never demon possession. That's something that never even gets brought up. And seemingly that's because it never happened. It wasn't a thing. Now, if, as it seems to be, and by the way, all evidence suggests that it didn't happen after Jesus' ministry, or at least after the first century, either. So if, as the evidence seems to suggest, demon possession was a phenomenon that was limited to the days and ministry of Jesus, why do you think? What could be some reasons?
To show the power of Jesus.
Okay.
That he was who he's claimed to be.
Yeah, that could be one for sure. Show Jesus' power and authority over them. It definitely adds to the special nature of his ministry, the days of the Messiah, that all the period before was looking forward to, and that we ever since have been looking back to. There's plenty of special things about that little snapshot in the timeline of human history, and that goes right along with that, doesn't it? That this special phenomenon of demon possession would be limited to that. And Jesus commonly showed that he has power over them. Mm-hmm.
Maybe Satan was using it as a force to discredit Jesus, or possibly find a way for Jesus not to be able to make it to the cross.
Yeah. Demon possession seems to be more or less in the category of what we might call the miraculous, because it's so closely linked and tied. It seems that only by miracles were they ever gotten rid of. The disciples, at least, tried at some point and failed to do it, and Jesus sort of made the point that this kind can be healed, or I forget the exact verb he used, but only by prayer, as far as they were concerned. But we still don't ever see it successfully being done apart from a miracle. Well, if, as the New Testament certainly suggests, miracles have ceased, demon possession has ceased as well. So Ephesians 4, 8 through 16, 1 Corinthians 13, 8 through 13, miracles ceasing, demon possession would go right along in that category. We can resist the devil through the gospel. The truth is the greatest weapon against the devil. He is the father of lies, and what better weapon can we have against lies than the truth? So all of that sort of goes hand in hand to indicate, or at least support, the idea that demon possession no longer happens. All we have to do is really look around to know it doesn't happen. Because if it did, we would know. Because especially today when everything is known, because everybody carries a camera in their pocket and can post it online to literally the entire world in seconds. If there was anything like demon possession, and again, there are some cases of extreme mental illness that could resemble some of these kinds of things. But the difference is in the details of those accounts and how there was an actual conscious spiritual being that had more or less hijacked this human being. And Jesus spoke with them and made them leave. And once that spirit left, or those spirits left, the man was a totally different person. He was back to himself. And we're not talking about finding the right medication that just happens to be perfect to balance the chemistry in their brains or whatever. We're talking about get out of this man. There they go. Boom. This man he snapped right out of it because something actually changed in him, and what changed in him cannot be detected by science. It cannot be detected or altered by medicine or therapy or anything like that. Jesus miraculously healed them, told the demon, the spirit, to leave. So just to reiterate, if it wasn't clear enough, it seems that these demons were the same, one and the same as that group of fallen angels that we don't get to read about how it happened, but we do get to read allusions to it, like in 2 Peter 2:4 and Jude 6, where Peter and Jude allude to the fact that it did happen, and Jesus alludes to it when he says the devil and his angels. Didn't know the devil had angels. Well, when you read that, you realize, wait, the devil has angels? How can the devil have angels? Well, it seems that the devil's angels are the ones that followed him, in that whatever made him fall, they fell with him, and God was temporarily using them, it seems. Maybe they were down in these pits of darkness, these chains of darkness, and God temporarily said, hey, I've got a use for you. And He more or less unleashed them for this extremely temporary time of a few years. And that was to go along with Jesus' ministry, casting out demons, showing His power over every single possible obstacle, natural, spiritual, demonic, everything. And that might help to explain the reaction of these demons when they said, have you come to torment us before the time, and don't send us into the abyss, or maybe back into the abyss? It all fits together as far as that goes. Of course, it doesn't really matter who they were, but there may be people today, and are people that believe it still happens today. And the reason they think that is because they don't properly understand what demon possession was, and they think it's just evil influence and all this thing. Yeah?
It's almost like a physical representation of sin, because it holds us. I mean, you fall so far that you cease to become yourself. You're just, that sin in general. And Him having that power over that, it might have been a physical kind of representation of the redeeming quality of them.
Yeah, very good point. It's almost like an extreme example, a visual almost of what sin does to people spiritually, except in these cases, especially in this man's case, you can see it. And now you convert all these things to spiritual, and you've got sin. And it all comes from the same place. It's all evil, it's all the devil and his influence, which leads us to our concluding thought here in Ephesians 6:10-13 about putting on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand against the wiles or schemes of the devil, and withstand on the evil day, and having done all to stand. And how Paul said in 1 Timothy 4:1 that in latter times people will fall away because of doctrines of demons. Well, sin, when we let it take control, does to our souls, and even ourselves to an extent, what the demons did to these people. It's not the same thing, But like Tyus mentioned, it's almost like a visual aid of what sin does to us inside of us. And it can turn us into totally different people. We can get to the point where I don't even recognize myself anymore. This is not who I should be and who I am. And it all comes down to, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to get rid of that? Am I going to take the steps I need to take? Or am I going to give up, not even fight? Am I going to just pray that God will get rid of all my evil influences? Well, no, I'm the one who needs to get rid of my evil influences. Maybe actively by getting rid of things, but then on top of that, like we talked about with that parable that Jesus told about the man who swept out his house, cleaned out his house, and talked about how, a demon leaves and then he's evil spirit, he brings back 7 with him and he's even worse than he was before. After we empty, we got to fill up with the armor of God. Put on that armor, fill ourselves up, our empty vessels up with godly things, righteousness, and all of that will go to help us to withstand the principalities and powers that we're fighting against, to use Paul's words.
At the end in verse 37, the whole multitude around the region asked him to depart. I mean, think about it. You just saw them take demons out of a man and put him into pigs.
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of sorcery is that?
Yeah. Apparently they must have been upset about the pigs or something. I don't know. They were more, whether they were concerned or mad about the pigs, they were blinded by the direct and the physical so much that they couldn't even think about the fact that Jesus just saved this man, this poor man. He saved this man in a way that nobody could ever dream. They thought that he was, crazy, or they may have even thought he was possessed by a demon, but they never would have dreamed that he was possessed by several demons. And if they knew that he was, they really would have thought he was hopeless. And yet here comes Jesus, and he just, boom, there he goes, saves him. And they go to Jesus, and they hear that he saved him, and they say, get out. We want you to leave our country, our region. Maybe that people today hear about amazing things that Jesus has done, just like we've studied tonight. Hear other things that Jesus has done, for example, going to a cross to die for our sins. And even after that, they don't want anything to do with him, because it means I will have to do something. I will have to acknowledge things in my life. I will have to make changes in my life. Well, those people need to understand the same thing that we need to understand. Rejecting Jesus so I don't have to change my life is not going to help me in the long run. I'm still going to stand before Him in judgment. And on that day, I want to make sure that I have not rejected Him in this life, so that when I stand before Him in judgment, it can be a happy day instead of the worst day of my life. And that's what we have to remember and keep in our minds and our lives. What am I doing today to follow Jesus, to accept Him? Or am I rejecting Him in my daily life and trying to find salvation or happiness in so many other areas of life?